Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the fifth installment of our Artist Chats. We're so excited that you've decided to join us tonight. And tonight we'll be talking to some wonderful theater artists that we have joining us. My name is Morgan. I'm going to be hosting tonight, and I would like to remind you before we get started, we will have one more Artist Chat this Saturday at the same time, 6 p.m., and we hope you can still join us for that. If you've missed any other chats, there should be down below on our Facebook page. Scroll down, find them, and enjoy the fun and get to know some really wonderful artists. So tonight, I would like to introduce you to the artists we have joining us. Let's start with Soph. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Soph Marsh. I live in Kansas City, Kansas, and I wrote Hell Montana, which is a full-length play about death and brothers and learning to appreciate your life and the people in it in spite of isolation.
Nice. All right, welcome, Mike.
Hi, Mike Speller. I am from Crest Hill, Illinois, which is right next to Joliet, the name people should remember. And I am the creator and performer with Worst Cruises Ever. Basically, it's a double bill between my take on the Flying Dutchman legend and a modern spin on the Odyssey.
Very nice. And finally, we have Tim.
Hey everybody, I'm Tim Mooney. I'm also coming to you from Illinois, the northwestern suburbs anyway, Buffalo Grove, Illinois. I'm in the Fringe this year with my one-man show, Moliere Than Thou.
All right, well, thank you guys for joining us tonight. I would love to start with just kind of a general question for all of you. Obviously, this past year has been crazy and unpredictable and a little bit debilitating for artists, to say the least. So I was wondering, what's it been like for the three of you to kind of create art in theater in the middle of a pandemic? And anyone who's free to start.
For me, it actually started last year. I was accepted and starting to work into the Elgin Fringe Festival, which is here in Illinois. And it was right as the pandemic was hitting, but they gave us the option of recording the shows or putting recorded versions online for them. And so that was happening in March when they were doing all this. And so I had the script ready. I got it recorded in midsummer, and then it went up in, I think, September is when their festival aired. So it was a nice, easy prep time for me. And they did all the production and production values, and that's the version I'm using at the festivals this year. So my stress was actually last year getting it all, worked out from a stage to a box. But this year it's actually been kind of nice. I just push a button and hopefully get accepted and move on.
That's awesome. I know for me, it's been a couple of different things. I work with Kansas City Public Theater as their new works dramaturg. So we've been doing a lot of basically just transitioning from doing new play readings in person to doing them on Zoom, which was kind of a struggle at first, but we were able to have some really effective readings and talkbacks over Zoom, kind of like what we're doing right now, which was really cool. So I got to be involved in that. And then other than that, I would say I've been doing a lot more writing. My friend and I had a commission to write a musical, so we've been working on that over the pandemic, and that's been a good way to feel like I'm still doing what I love, doing my craft, but it's something that you can do even whenever you can't meet in person. So it's been a lot of writing and Zoom.
Definitely. Tim, what about for you?
Hang on one second. I've lost my screen. Can you guys still see me?
Yeah, we can see you.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll just dance as if no one is watching. Life went a little crazy for me when all this shut down. Maybe if I come to no, I'm still not seeing myself, but it doesn't matter. I normally make my living touring to high schools and colleges, and I do the Fringe thing during the summer just for fun and for reviews and to get some exposure. But the pandemic shut everything down in the middle of March, and I lost a bunch of bookings. I was right in the middle of the Rogue Fringe Festival at the time, where the first weekend was business as usual, and the second weekend was like people started to avoid going to the theater or going anywhere public. So that was crazy. Here I go, Zoom meeting. That brings me back. And so I kind of raced home back to Chicago and started a series in which I was broadcasting performances on a weekly basis, either on Facebook Live on Sunday nights or on Zoom on Monday nights. I had and have a series of 10 different one-man shows that I started doing essentially in repertory and, working for tips and trying to just scrape by whatever way I could. I actually did much better than I had imagined I would, if only because I realized how much all these years I have been spending on gas and hotel. And without those expenses, I can actually live on much less than I had been. So I got good at performing into a little camera over time, and the real challenge is that I don't have audience reaction anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I have to guess when I'm performing on Zoom. I would shut everyone else's cameras and microphones off because there's that little half-second delay between me speaking something and you hearing it, and them laughing at it and me hearing their laughter, which would throw me off entirely. And so I was just performing into an imaginary audience that lived in my brain and hoping that it was working at the other side. So that's been my big challenge for the year. But it's taught me a lot about video, not necessarily how to operate this Zoom thing, but lighting and backdrop and all of that. I have now transitioned one more time into actually recording these pieces so that with like 3 different cameras so that I can capture kind of a final really good version of it that I can just broadcast without driving and without hotels and adding some of the carbon footprint and all of that. So that's been my year.
Yeah, I know it's been crazy for everyone. Even as a student who's in the arts, I know how insane this has been for me. But to be out there creating art and putting yourself out there, I really have to commend you guys. It's impressive what you guys do. So I would love to start with Soph and talk about Hell, Montana. It's
Awesome.
such an interesting show. I watched it today, and I just kind of it made me feel very reminiscent of like the beginning of quarantine when you're all alone and stuff. And so I was wondering how the idea for Hell came about. Was it birthed out of quarantine? Was it just something that had been brewing for a while? How did Hell come about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it actually feels weird now, but I actually wrote the play in December of 2019 through January of 2020. So like right before the pandemic happened. And my inspiration for the play was isolation, but it was more like more of an internal isolation. I had been struggling with some mental health stuff and depression stuff and was kind of coming out of that. And I've always used writing as a coping mechanism and something to help me through things like that. And so I just was writing down the way that I felt isolated and the way that I felt the people in my life and being around them helped me. And yet it felt like my brain was constantly trying to isolate me from them. So I always felt like I don't want to go out. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to see people. But then that being around them is what I actually needed to help me feel better, is what I found. And so I wanted to write a play that encapsulated that feeling that I felt whenever I was kind of in that headspace of like feeling depressed. And so that's where the idea of Hell came in, of this girl who's just trapped in her house and can't leave and can't see anyone. And then, someone stumbles in and what happens there. And it was also sort of, I've always liked to play No Exit, and it is sort of a response to No Exit with a kind of opposite conceit, that rather than hell being other people, that hell is isolation from other people. And then the pandemic happened and I was like, oh my goodness. And so it has impacted the way I look at the show. I haven't tweaked it a lot since the pandemic, but in light of the pandemic, I think I do have some insights that I would like to edit some of the script maybe in lieu of the pandemic. And it is interesting hearing the reactions from people now during a pandemic to this play that is about being stuck in your house and not able to go outside. It's crazy the way that timing worked out, but that's sort of my experience with working on it, with writing it.
I love that it was kind of a response to No Exit. I also love that play, and I never even thought about that. So I love hearing that. To me, that's fascinating.
Yeah, thank you.
I do have to ask, why hell in Montana?
I just love Montana. I love the idea of like a cozy little cabin in the wintertime. It just is something that makes you feel cozy and like warm and at home. But then whenever you're stuck there in that sort of isolated spot, the things that are supposed to be comforting to you, it's like they aren't. And so I kind of envision, when I was trying to think of like something that evoked almost like Christmas, like that like coziness of like, and it was like a log cabin in Montana. It just feels like that to me, like sort of Midwestern coziness in the wintertime. And so I liked that contrast of it being like, well, this can't be bad. It's this nice little cabin in a nice wintry wonderland. And then that is like becomes her personal hell, literally, not almost literally. So that was kind of my inspiration. And also I just like Montana.
Love letter Montana, except it's called hell. So
yeah,
Montana should be fine with it.
Yeah.
Also, you kind of did subvert the idea of what hell is because you made it snowy and you made it comforting.
Mm-hmm.
Was that because you wanted that comfort to kind of become hell, or was it just you had from when you set out to write it, you're going to subvert the idea of hell?
A mixture of the two, I would say. Whenever I'm writing, I get like kind of random ideas in my head. Even just like when I'm living my life, I'll get like a little nugget of an idea and I'll just like store it away. And so I remember a nugget of an idea I had at one point was somebody opening a bed and breakfast in hell. That was like a kind of idea I had. And then it actually wasn't in the original script, the original draft of this play. And then I wrote it in, and I think it's better with it. But there was another little joke I had that was a better answer to your question, but I forgot what your question was. Oh, subverting. The idea of hell. Oh yes, the joke in the very beginning about like, I'm not going to be tortured with fire. And she says, oh, there is a fire. And then she's like, but not a lake of fire. And would you like a lake of fire? I kind of had that joke in my head. And so that was also part of what took me to the cold place instead of the hot place.
Yeah. What's it like to see your work performed, especially on video? Because it's got to be very different than seeing your work performed like on a stage.
Yeah. Since I wrote it right before the pandemic, I was able to see a sort of staged reading of it right before the pandemic, which was an earlier draft. So I was able to see a more relaxed script in hand, but still acted out version of it before the pandemic, which was nice. Seeing it recorded, it's just like an interesting process because you don't really get the audience reactions in the same way. But it was cool to be able to work with a different medium. And we talked about whether we wanted to do it in more of a Zoom style or act it out. And we decided to act it out for a few reasons, but also because I wanted to see it with the stage directions and everything. And so we decided to act it out, and I'm glad with it. I think it worked out well. I think you can tell that it was written for a stage and not for the screen. But it was still a good process, definitely a learning process, but it was fun and exciting.
No, it's a absolutely gorgeous piece. I loved watching it today. So please go check out Hell Montana. It's a fabulous way of looking at isolation and what it means to have your own personal hell. I think it's wonderful. It's a great piece, Soph.
Thank you.
All right, Mike, I'd love to move on to your show next.
Okay.
So when I first read the title for your show, I gotta admit, I was not expecting what I got. I was expecting, oh, it's some kind of comedy about a bad cruise trip. And that's not what you got. You got these two very interesting stories. So how did that title come about for this show? I'm very curious.
I'd been to KC 2 or 3 times in the past, and I brought collections of Gothic horror stories. And I really wanted to kind of get back to my comedian character roots. So since I perform basically like a 17-year cicada, I come back to the Fringe every 3 years or so. I knew 2020 was supposed to be the year I came back down, hopefully to KC. And I wanted to write something on the Odyssey. And then I was at a story concert in the spring of 19, I think. And one of the showcases, there's just various performers getting up, and once somebody brought up a fantasy little story in modern life, but she said the phrase feral cupcakes. And it kind of set me down the road of, that would be a very cool and expendable way of getting rid of all these crew members on the Odyssey, as if they were edible instead of real flesh and bone human beings. And so that was the impetus to write the original piece. But then I did the adaptation over the summer, and it was a little short by Fringe standards. And since I had made my living basically doing the Gothic horror story stuff, I kind of polled my friends, what is a naval adventure or a naval legend you guys want to hear something about? And so I got Flying Dutchman was the consistent thing. And I thought, okay, I've done humor within the horror stories, but now it's going to be like an 80-20 mix. And then what do you tag the show with that combines comedy and tragedy? So you can't call it Two Masks, Greek and that kind of thing. So I chose probably the worst title ever because it's the last one in all the listings at all the festivals. So worst cruises ever ended up having another connotation to the worst, but it was the only way to package the yin and the yang there.
Yeah. No, and I love that your show is kind of that yin and yang. You get that tragedy first, and then you get that comedy afterwards to kind of help balance it out. I think that's a wonderful idea. You said yourself you're a Fringe veteran. Obviously, this year has been really weird with doing a bunch of digital Fringes and kind of making those cycles. So what's it been like having to go from those years of having that in-person Fringe to that digital Fringe? Is there a con to either one? Is there one you like more? I would love to hear about that experience for you.
I'm not a glass half full kind of guy usually, but it's actually been a benefit. Like Tim was saying, that you don't have that expense of the travel and the hotel and those other things. But the reason I was periodic in my appearances is I would always try to package any festival around a literal work vacation. And so that's what I'm missing now is my work vacations are like 2 days and 3 days, but I'm not getting that full exposure because you just can't go out right now. So I do miss that part of it because I got to get housed with, friends in the area of the festival, and we used to spend a lot of time together. As far as the virtual side goes, like I said, that's been a bonus is because I don't have to do a live stream at every festival. I got it recorded first, and it's become a version that I really like. As far as the recording itself, the Odyssey was actually on my feet. It's pretty much what I envisioned rehearsing when I was up on stage with it originally. But the Dutchman, I really had to just kind of sit down. It was supposed to be on a ship. And so I had these big ropes I was going to be using as business to tie them off, and, bells and whistles and wave sounds and all of that. And I really just said, I kind of like the idea of the survivor confessionals and to just sit down and have the journal be a one-on-one conversation. And so that's the adaptation I made. But I'm looking forward to this fall as things open up, because I do really want to get it on my feet, because that was the original vision, and I hate missing out, I guess is the word. So it's been a mixed bag of good and bad, but more positive because I do get more exposure this way.
Yeah, and everyone wants more exposure, and especially if you create good art like you do. I mean, that's wonderful for you. Popping back to something you said earlier, you said you do a lot with like kind of gothic stories. So where does that draw to gothic stories come from for you? Is it just something you kind of grew up on? Is it something you later realized I like this genre? How did that happen?
Yeah, I guess I had what you would call a paranormal experience when I was a young kid. And then right after that, our school library was kind of liberal for its time, and so it would be have multiple volumes on its shelves of real life ghost stories, like English castles and the ghosts that inhabit them, or New England shipwrecks and the spirits that live there. And there I'd be like, whoa, this is my school library. I love this shit. And then my dad was actually a member of the science fiction book club, but he would also grab some outliers like Edgar Allan Poe's collected works. He had like some Richard Matheson stuff, I think, too, was original writer for the Twilight Zone series. So there were a lot of things that I just kind of grabbed onto, and I just love that living on the edge aspect to those stories, old and new. And getting on stage is a great way of kind of, somebody called me a missionary for the original literature, but I feel like I'm more of an advocate.
I think gothic stories are fascinating, so I love getting to hear like how people got into them and what they like about them. Obviously you did this all on your own. You filmed in your own little box. Was it hard for you to kind of adjust from being on stage and telling stories to focusing on a camera?
Yeah, again, I struggled with the same thing Tim struggled with. Is just I had some on-camera experience, but it was like 25 years ago, and so to get back on that horse's saddle and try to do it well was the hard thing. I think we did 2 takes on that particular aspect of Dutchman. But because I was on my feet with the other one, it was actually a lot more comfortable and a little bit more consistent. So at this point, if I had to do somebody else virtual or do another performance virtual, I think I've got a little bit more grounding now, a little more experience trying it.
Good. Well, I think your show is wonderful. I love your interpretation of The Flying Dutchman. I love your interpretation of The Odyssey. Both are fantastic. So if any of you watching want that double whammy of drama and comedy, but you don't want to watch 2 separate shows, go check out Worst Cruises Ever. It's a fabulous show. Yeah. All right, Tim, the Moliere himself. So obviously this is a one-man show about Moliere and the year of the 400th birthday of Moliere. It's a big celebration. So I wanted to hear your opinion on how do you keep a writer like Moliere relevant? How do you make people my age who are in college and young adults, how do you get them interested in someone like him instead of keeping him in history textbooks?
Well, I've been doing Moliere since 1997 now on a fairly regular basis. I started by writing new adaptations of Moliere's plays into English rhymed iambic pentameter. And Moliere Than Thou, my one-man show, is drawn from 10 of those plays. So I guess he's relevant to me, and I try to put him into words that are going to be new jokes that a modern American audience will respond to. So I think what a lot of translators do is they limit themselves to the words the writer actually wrote and then try to not not get it word for word, but to live in that universe where the only jokes that are available to you are the ones that that person in the 17th century might have been able to tell, or the words that that person might have had available to them. I kind of throw that out the window. The only things I don't include in my Moliere adaptations is any reference to technology. So, you know, people don't make a call; they pay a call. They don't. You know, obviously, all of the language that we have around the telephone and the car and the computer, you know, I eliminate that, but I use just about everything else, so that I try to use a language that will be filled with puns and repartee that strikes us as funny in our modern life. So that's what I started out working on, and that has done very well for me. I've ended up with 17 new versions of the plays of Moliere in rhymed iambic pentameter, and about 15 of them have been published variously, and they've been performed as full cast plays about somewhere between 150 and 200 times they've been produced. Moliere the Now is the one-man play that I created out of those plays starting in the year 2000, and that was my first ever one-man play. And I created that to be able to introduce people to the character and the world and the works of Moliere in a kind of a concise format to get other people as excited about him as I was. Actually, I was invited to give a talk to the Canadian Women's Guild here in the Chicago area for their luncheon. But they didn't want my usual lecture about Moliere. They wanted some sort of a performance. And so I was struck left wondering, you know, why would Moliere, who has a company of some 14 to 17 actors around him all the time, why would he ever find himself performing alone? Well, sometimes it's just a matter of asking the right question before the right answer starts to come to you. And I thought, well, what if they all got sick, but Moliere was okay, and he couldn't take the night off because people had already bought tickets, and he spent his life scraping by from one performance to another, barely keeping afloat. He couldn't afford to refund their money. So what would he do to hang on to their money? And so he comes up with a performance. Well, since he often did command performances for the king would have the option of requesting any performance in the catalog that he might want to see for this Wednesday. And Moliere would have to keep those lines kind of alive in his head. And so I then had to decide what the rest of the cast had all come down with, because it couldn't be anything infectious that Moliere himself might have caught. So I decided they all ate the fish while Moliere ate chicken. They came down with food poisoning, and Moliere was still okay. And so that was the light bulb that got that play underway. I've started performing it in 2000. I've lost count of how many times I've performed it since then, but it's at least 500, probably not quite 1,000.
And I'm going to interrupt for a second. I was curious reading the website and the show blurb so you've been performing it, but is this the first time you've fringed it?
Oh no, I started fringing back in 2003, and this is, as best I counted, this is fringe number 73 for me.
But I mean, Moliere itself is.
No, this is the first time I've broadcast it.
Okay.
So I created the video, and this is the first time I've done a 3-camera video where I've got different angles coming in on me, and I actually had to sit down and edit that footage and worked with an editor. And so But no, this is not the first time I've done it at a Fringe. This may be Fringe number 12 for it, or some such.
Okay.
No, so, I love Moliere. I think he's actually a really interesting writer. So that's why I was always so curious, because not everyone has that same appreciation, but I love that you do. Obviously he in Moliere, then now he has a lot of his own lines memorized and he goes off in these monologues. So how did you choose what bits from his plays that you wanted to include in this? Were there like your favorite plays, things that you thought were most important from his catalog? How did that?
When I started working on this, when I started working on Moliere, I started directing the plays. I directed Tartuffe and The Miser, but there was such it was so insane trying to direct plays that I had also written that I just felt the burden of production on me in a really powerful way. I stopped directing the plays and started auditioning for them, and found myself getting cast in the roles that Moliere himself had originally performed. So I had performed Scapan, the Doctor in Spite of Himself, the Imaginary Cuckold, and the Misanthrope. All four playing the roles Moliere himself had originally played. Then, when it came time to do this luncheon for the Canadian Women's Guild, I easily could select the monologues from those four plays that I knew I really enjoyed and that worked very well. And then I started tracing through the scripts that I had already written, picking out my favorite monologues. There's always those monologues, and those of you who are writers here with me probably would know this feeling, these monologues where you feel like you're writing over your head. You stumble into a phrasing or a cleverness that you didn't see coming, and it's like, oh, that is so good. And you're laughing out loud at your own quirky thoughts about the thing at 2:00 in the morning. Well, there's at least a monologue like that in all of the ones that I had done. And so I started pairing my way through those and trying to balance characters, because Moliere would often play the cuckolded husband, and I didn't want to do 10 different takes on the cuckolded husband. I could do one or two of those, but mix it in with clever servants and the Don Juan character, and so it was a mix of stuff that I really like to do, stuff that I felt would give it balance, and just stuff that I thought people would find hilarious. Also, what I'm not able to do so much in video here is, when I started out doing this, there was a lot of audience participation. So as Tartuffe, I would get a volunteer from the audience to come up on stage with me to read in the role of Elmire as Tartuffe was attempting to seduce her. So fun all around.
Yeah. Where did this love of Moliere start? You said you've been working on him since the 1970s, I believe is what you said. So where did that love of Moliere and wanting to keep doing him for so long, where did that come from?
I was, back in the late 80s, I was the assistant director on a production of Tartuffe for the Seattle Repertory Theater. And I was really fascinated by it, especially fascinated by the translation, which was a Richard Wilbur translation, and amazed that someone could take French verse and actually translate it into English verse, and that it would still work and be funny and clever. And I sat on that awareness for about 10 years, till I was running my own theater company in the Chicago suburbs. In 1997, we specialized in doing original material, and it was tough getting an audience out for plays that they'd never heard of before. So during the summer especially, we started doing titles that people would recognize. And so we all wanted to do Tartuffe, and I thought, wouldn't it be a nice mix of doing a title people recognize and doing something original if I could write a new version of Tartuffe? I had those Seattle rep actors in my head because they were hilarious, both on stage and off. And so I wrote words into their mouths in my imagined version of the funniest version they could do of Tartuffe. And it came out really, really well. And so the theater had been struggling at that point. So I quit running the theater to turn to adapting new variations of the plays of Moliere into rhymed iambic English pentameter. And that started me down a path which ultimately led me to creating a one-man play and close to a dozen one-man plays now that I've been touring around the country for 21 years, something like that.
No. I've got to ask purely out of my own curiosity, because I am very interested in like that dramaturgical side, literary side of translation and things like that. What is it like to translate Moliere's work? Is it very hard if you don't know French? What are some of the challenges that arise with it?
My biggest challenge is finding out what the original joke was, because my vision of Moliere is he's always working on a joke. He's always developing one. He'll have a long, seemingly boring monologue that will pay off in a very broad physical thing. So it's trying to find out what is the joke Moliere is working on at any given moment and building toward that end. And then finding new English rhymes that are going to surprise people at every step along the way. So that I actually developed my own personal rhyming dictionary as I worked, so that I would type in the word that I knew was the one that would pay off as the second rhyming word in a couplet. And then I had to find the setup to that with another rhyming word. And so as I, if the word that would pay off would be dog, I would work my way through the catalog of words that rhyme with dog, going through the alphabet of bog, cog, dog, frog, log, slog, mog, and I would type those in. And so the next time I came back to needing a rhyme for dog or log, at that point, I would do a little search in my word processing document, find that word, that original word that I had tried to rhyme 3 years prior, and say, oh, here's all the rhymes that are available to me. Let me see what works with that. My greatest triumph is rhyming orange, because that's supposedly a famous unrhymable word, but in the Misanthrope, somebody is referring to Alceste's costume being of the color orange, and I had to figure it out, and so I had the guy say, that color I believe matches your tinge.
Wow, that's good.
Also, there's door hinge, but that wasn't appropriate at that moment.
No, I think your one-man show is absolutely fascinating. I loved watching it. It was such a great time for me. So if you want to get into Moliere, but you don't exactly know how to go about it, go watch Moliere now. It's a great introduction to Moliere's work, and it's a fun way to spend about an hour. So please go. You did a fabulous job, Tim. I love it.
I've been saving this one for Kansas City for this year because I know you guys are making a big deal out of Moliere this year. The 400th birthday celebration is coming up in January. So if you're looking forward to or if you're dreading that, perhaps it's best to check out Moliere now and get access to what all those plays were about.
No, my college is partaking in the 400 years of Moliere. We're doing Learned Ladies in the fall. So I really love this.
Learned Ladies is a fabulous show.
I have a few more questions for you guys before we wrap up the night. But I wanted to ask you guys, what do you hope your audience comes away with from your show? Do you want a specific feeling to follow them? Do you want to give them joy for an hour? Do you want to make them question things? What do you want your audience to get out of your works? For all of you.
For me, I think it's advocacy for the classic literature. Tim is keeping Moliere and Shakespeare relevant, and for me, I don't want Saw, the motion picture to be everybody's definition of horror. So I go back to the monkey's paw, didn't mean to rhyme that, or open window and things like that. So if people walk away with the title in their head, or people walk away and they go to their library and find English castles and the ghosts that live in them, I've kind of done my job, at least, to keep them in touch with it for a day or more.
I love that.
I would say I hope it helps people feel, I feel like it feels cheesy and on the nose to say, I hope it makes people feel like they're not alone, because that's sort of the theme of the play. It's about a girl who's isolated in hell, and a boy who's isolated in hell, and the way that they find each other and realize that they don't have to be alone, and hopefully can find others and their journey to do that. But also, having lived through the pandemic for the past year, it's a play where the entire first act is this girl trying to figure out how to entertain herself alone in her house. So I hope it helps people feel like they're seen in that experience that we've all had for the past year and a half. And I hope that it can bring some levity and humor to that experience as well, since it is somehow such like an accurate portrayal of what the past year has felt like, just being stuck inside, trying to entertain yourself, reciting Shakespeare, doing whatever you have to do to stay alive.
For my part, I hope that I can give people access to writers' experiences that seem inscrutable, that seem impenetrable. Over the years, I've gotten better and better at accessing Moliere and accessing Shakespeare, and have always recently been surprised when people feel so shut out of that world. And all of human knowledge is somewhere contained in Shakespeare. All of comedy lives inside of Moliere, and I want people to walk away feeling like, oh, I know enough about this guy now that I can go to see one of those plays and I can get all the inside jokes and I can know what's going on with the characters. So if I can succeed at that, I feel like I'm opening up a world to them that will pay off down the line.
Absolutely. So my final question for the night for all of you is, I would love for you guys to tell us, where can we find you? Where can we support you? Obviously, we want to help you guys out as much as we can during the pandemic. So how can the people watching find your works? How can they support you? Where are you going to be next? Give us all the information. Plug yourselves.
All right, I'll start. I'm at timmooney.rep.com. And I have a Patreon page, which is patreon.com/timmooney.rep. But you can find tons of my stuff on YouTube. I think I've got 400 or so video clips uploaded there at which is my YouTube name is Moliere Lover. But simultaneous to the KC Fringe, I'm also broadcasting my one-man comedy of errors, which is called Breakneck Comedy of Errors, to a festival in New York called the So Many Shakespeares Festival. This year, it's 6 different takes on comedy of errors, and mine is one of those. After this Fringe is done, I'm broadcasting that same comedy of errors to the Minnesota Fringe Festival. After that's done, I'm performing Shakespeare's Histories, 10 epic plays at a breakneck pace, all 10 history plays in 1 hour, to the Indie Fringe Festival. And after that, I'm just hoping that schools are back to booking me again, and I'll have some work in the coming year.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I can go next. If you want to read my work or support my work, I have a new play exchange, which is just Soph Marsh. So you can find me on there. I have all of my work on there, and also some information about my dramaturgical work. I am the New Works dramaturge at Kansas City Public Theater. So we're getting ready to hopefully kick off our in-person season again this September, and all of our shows are free. So you can also catch me there. And if you need a dramaturg, I'm available for freelance dramaturgy as well. And if you want to contact me about that, you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is otakusoph, OTAKUSOPH. And then if you want to support more of my work in the coming future, my friend Joel Wally and I have written a musical called A Campbell Family Christmas that, if you're local, is going to be performed at the Johnson County Arts and Heritage Center this December through Theater in the Park. So you can find all the information there through the Johnson County website for the dates, but it's running for the whole month of December there. So if you want to support us, you can get tickets to that and come see that. And also support Kansas City Public Theater. All of our theater is completely free. No cost for the tickets or anything. So yeah, that's how you can find me and support me.
I am the cicada. I am the locust. I'm going into hibernation for a while. So I'm negotiating to get a couple of theaters to host the Gothic horror show this fall live in person. So I would be helping reopen those spaces. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that does happen. Yeah, it's a part-time passion for me. Well, it's full-time passion, but it's part-time on stage usually. So in the fall, I'll be in the Chicagoland area, hopefully doing it for a couple of extended runs. But in the meantime, if you want to look up more of the funny stuff instead of the horror stuff, I'm listed on two websites, Illinois Storytelling, which is a collection of professionals here in the state, and Northland Storytelling Conference, which is a collection of professionals in the Midwest. So just look up Mike Speller, Storyteller, and you can find out everything you ever wanted to know, and probably too much.
All right. And the best and most immediate way you can support all of these artists you've seen tonight is to go to kcfringe.org and go and buy yourself a ticket to their shows. We have tickets, everything from $5 for single tickets up to a full access VIP pass that gives you an extra bonus week to our Fringe. Our festival ends on Sunday, so get your tickets before that ends. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. We loved getting to talk to you and hear about your shows. You all were such wonderful people. I'd like to remind everyone we have one chat left in this series on Saturday, July 31st, 6 p.m. We hope you will come help us with that. And then our closing party for this Fringe is August 1st at 6 p.m. We hope to see you then. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Morgan.
you.
Thanks, Bryson.